Hey everybody, this is HD. Welcome back, and it is time for another Daily Ladder broadcast. This is currently Tuesday, still Tuesday. I just got done casting the Drone versus Drone game, and it's time for my next Daily Ladder. Countdown has begun. My opponent will be Gaussian, a Protoss player, and it looks like it is going to be on Blistering Sands once again. Now, this map, Blistering Sands, not the best map for Zerg versus Protoss. This is probably one of the worst maps, I would say, for Zerg versus Protoss if you're Zerg. In order, I would say Steppes of War, Delta Quadrant, Jungle Basin, Blistering Sands. These are all pretty bad maps if you're Zerg against a Protoss player. And on this map, the reason for it being not a great map is because of those backdoor rocks. 4-gate can be very, very powerful. A lot of times Protoss players will actually go for an early expansion and build 2 gateways at their choke of the natural, and when they do that, you're kind of forced to get a 3rd early on, and it can be a tough situation if you're Zerg. So this is going to be another Daily Ladder. Of course, it is first person view. It is once again me playing Zerg, which is my main race. I am currently Masters in I don't know what my division is. It's something like Alpha, Theta, Omicron. It's a fraternity. I don't know what it is, but it is. I am going to be playing Zerg. I will be doing, of course, Protoss and Terrans as well throughout the week. And yeah, my strategy this time around is going to be going for a 14 hatch. Nowadays, in Zerg versus Protoss, I do like to go for the early expansion, and the reason for that is with the last patch, they nerfed it so that Protoss players were no longer able to build 2 pylons and block your main from your natural. Now it does require 3 pylons, which is quite a bit more of an investment cost, and it makes it so that 14 hatching is more safe and much easier to hold off against a Protoss player. So I am going to be going for the 14 hatch. Note, I pulled my drone before I had, I think I pulled my drone around 150 minerals, and the reason for that is if your opponent tries to block it off with a pylon, well, then you could just throw a spawning pool down as soon as you hit 200 minerals. So as you guys can see, this is just the standard opening for Zerg versus Protoss. I'm just going to bring my drone around, get some good scouting information in. Whenever you can't scout manually, the best thing to do is just use a shift Q. You just hold down shift with your left hand and then use the right click, and you could just spam a queue of commands and then just have the drone kind of run circles around the enemy base. So it's kind of a nice strategy. Keeps your drone alive for a long time, and it allows you to scout without having to pull your attention away from your main. Now, I am also pulling a drone around the map. I'm trying to figure out where that probe went. It looks like the probe went to the Xel'Naga watchtower. So I'm going to try to go ahead and dispatch of that probe. As you guys can see on the mini-map, I'm chasing it away right now. And of course, back at the main, I am getting my gas up. And this is all super standard. My strategy eventually is to go for a combination of Roach Hydra, which I think is the most powerful build versus Protoss nowadays. It's just pure Roaches and Hydras. But obviously Protoss players can dictate the game. If they go for something like Void Rays, if they go for Void Rays, then you have to get Hydras or Corruptors or Mutas. And if they go for something like a 4-gate, well, you're going to have to go for Roaches and Lings. So right now, my whole strategy is just to scout. This is what the Zerg player needs to do. They need to sacrifice their overlords when possible. Use that drone, which, as you guys can see, I have kind of chilling inside the main right now. And I'm going to bring that around and try to figure out what my opponent's up to. I need to know what buildings he's going for. Obviously, my opponent has 2 gas already, as you guys can see on the mini-map. So it's very well possible that he's throwing down Stargates right now. And I am bringing my drone in to scout. And unfortunately, I don't see any buildings whatsoever. As you guys can see on the mini-map, there are no buildings that I can see. And it looks like, yeah, my opponent hasn't built anything yet, and this is really, really concerning because there's a possibility that he's trying to proxy Stargate me. Remember that he has that he got that 2nd gas early on. As you guys can see, 2 gases up on the mini-map. He still hasn't built anything inside the main, so because of all these things, there's a possibility that he might be throwing up Stargate somewhere around the map, maybe even tucked away somewhere inside his main. And to deal with this, you need to get a lot of queens. So whenever I play Zerg, I'm always trying to play on the cautious side. Try to play defensively, prepare for anything, whatever is possible. So as you guys can see, I am getting a bunch of queens. I'm getting an evolution chamber, and the evolution chamber, of course, allows me to build spore crawlers to defend against the air. Now, I do have a couple of Zerglings out. I'm just going to use these to scout and see if I can catch any of the proxy Stargates that I have an inkling might be on the minimap somewhere. And if I can see them, then I'll be able to adapt my build accordingly. If not, then I'm going to have to figure out what my opponent's up to, and eventually I'm going to have to build attacking units. Right now, I'm purely focused on building drones. I don't want to commit to a certain type of unit that may cost me the game. Obviously, if I build a bunch of roaches, they're not going to be able to hit a void ray, and if I build a bunch of the wrong units, then it can obviously cost me the game. So I did scout out with my Zerglings. I didn't find anything, but there we go. I finally found that there is a pylon on that Xel'Naga Watchtower and a bunch of stalkers. So immediately I know that it's some kind of a delayed 4-gate, some kind of a 3-gate, some kind of 4-gate. And my opponent is trying to basically use the Protoss 4-gate against me. This is a build that's still very, very powerful. And there my Overlord finally gets in there and scouts out the 4 warp gates. So now I know what my opponent's doing. As soon as I saw that pylon, I built as many roaches as I possibly could. Get them down to your natural ramp. Don't allow your opponent to block you in with the force field. And get as many units as you can. And if you have to, pull drones off the line. So as you guys can see, I'm pulling drones. I'm bringing all my units around here. Whatever you can do to defend against the 4-gate. And I guess this video is kind of a video on how to defend one of the most feared Protoss strategies on Battle.net. It's the Protoss 4-gate. It's extremely difficult to deal with, especially around low diamond to even high diamond. You can have difficulties dealing with this kind of strategy. And even every now and then, I even die to the good old Protoss 4-gate. So this is basically how you can deal with it. Luckily for me, my opponent was a little delayed with this attack. I think it was about maybe a minute delayed. And so I do have a pretty sizable army now of roaches and speedlings, and roaches and speedlings usually are good enough to defend against this kind of a Protoss strategy, this Protoss 4-gate. Now I'm just going to go back home to macro. Obviously I have the advantage now. I have 2 bases, remember, whereas my opponent only has 1. And I am going to try to go ahead and sneak in a couple of Zerglings, but my opponent wisely leaving a Zealot at that choke is pretty much going to make it impossible for me to run in there. So at this point in the game, if you're able to defend against your opponent and whatever strategy they try to use, this is when you want to transition into good old standard macro. This is where you want to build up your economy, continue to build attacking units and add them into your army size, and eventually pick your spots wisely. Eventually when you feel comfortable, you push out and you try to end the game. Now notice I am getting upgrades for my army units. I got Roach Speed on the way. I've also got, I believe, Carapace or Missile or Melee on the way as well off of that Evolution Chamber. That's just making use of the Evo Chamber, which I originally built just for Spore Crawlers. I was concerned about Stargates. Obviously, my scouting, my read was wrong, and when your read is wrong, you gotta adapt as quickly as possible. StarCraft is a game that's very, very unforgiving, but if you're able to adapt and you're able to transition your strategy quickly enough, usually you're able to defend and you're not gonna cost yourself the game. So I do feel like I have an opportunity to push out here and make an attack happen. I can see my opponent is trying to play catch up right now, and if my opponent's going to do this, now is where you can change the tables a little bit on Blistering Sands. This is where the map actually starts to favor Zerg a little more. After the 4-gate stage, after that early aggression, now you can try to bust down the backdoor rocks and use Speedlings to run in there and be annoying as hell. Just running in Speedlings, going straight into the Nexus and doing damage. And as a Protoss player, you have to, no matter what the cost, you cannot allow those backdoor rocks to get taken out. So my opponent is now basically in a position that's kind of difficult. He has to defend both the natural and both the backdoor rocks, and I'm going to take advantage of that. During this time when he's uneasy and when he's scared, this is when I'm going to go for my gold expansion. So you guys can see I have my units now taking down those rocks at the gold. Always focusing on macro. You never really want to commit to something that may or may not cost you the game and overcommitting your forces. But going for economy is always, more often rather than not, the safer choice in StarCraft 2. So as you guys can see, I am starting to pump up more and more units, spreading out my creep across the map. Things are looking pretty good right now. And I'm, of course, going to bring a couple of Zerglings around just to grab the Xel'Naga watchtowers. And it looks like I do have a pretty sizable army at this point, and this is when you want to go ahead and push forward. My Roach speed is now finished as well. I can go ahead and take out, hit these backdoor rocks once again, force my opponent to run all of his forces up towards my units from the natural, and I'm expecting to see that come anytime soon. So here we go. There you guys can see my opponent coming forward, and my opponent actually threw force fields down at his ramp, and I'm going to take advantage of that. If he threw force fields down there, that means he cannot bring reinforcements from the main. And so I've got an opportunity here to just take out his entire army when they're cornered towards the backside. And so this is really just taking advantage of my opponent's somewhat bad force field placement. So basically, I think this is going to be a pretty relatively quick GG, and my opponent says hooray for Roach spam. But hey, if your opponent is going to go for a 4-gate, you really don't have many units to defend against that. You've got the Roach, which is probably the most sturdiest unit of all at the early stages of the game. So I hope you guys enjoyed that broadcast. More of a walkthrough, I suppose, on how to defend against the dreaded Protoss 4-gate if you're Zerg. And even if you're Terran or Protoss, still a strategy that's used quite often nowadays. You know, just know how to defend against it. It takes practice, and remember that the 4-gate usually hits around the 6-minute mark in game time on the bottom left-hand corner. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'm going to go ahead and cast a couple of pro games really soon here, and that's it for me. This is going to be the 2 daily ladders, Monday and Tuesday, currently February 8th, and we're going to have more coming out soon. HD, signing out.